Okay, good day to all students that are watching this video. Firstly, apologies for the live stream. We know that a few of you may have tuned in and we've had some technical difficulties and we couldn't seem to sort that. So what we've decided to do instead is we've decided to record all the content and then still make it available on the YouTube channel, just as it would have been after the live stream. The only problem is that you won't be able to interact with us this time via the chat function. But if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section on the video and one of us will get back to you. Otherwise, feel free to get in touch with us personally via WhatsApp, via social media platforms, and we'll still get in touch with you. So basically, what today's session was meant to be on, the exam technique session, just in short, is quickly to help students identify where their weaknesses are in terms of conquering exams and how to best ace your exams. For example, if you don't walk into an exam with the best mindset and you don't prep your exam properly in terms of your workspace and things like that, that could also lead you to things like not finishing your exam or feeling additional pressure during the exam. So we're basically here to try and help you avoid those kind of things. And yeah, so the structure for today is going to be, we're going to start off with science, we're going to then go into mathematics and then accounting for exam technique, and integrated with all those different subjects will be some general exam technique tips and rules and things like that. So what to do, what not to do, how to feel and how to think about things, because mindset does play a really important role. At the end, we'll do some general tips and then I'll speak to you a bit more about Gift of the Educators. In short, Gift of the Educators is a non-profit tutoring company that focuses on uplifting both students that can afford it and that cannot afford it. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our science department and he will take it from there.
Hi guys, Shivambun Shamulo. I'm the metric science tutor and gift of the educators, and I've been with the organization for a couple of months now. And I'm doing my first year in chemical engineering at the University of the Witwatersrand. So today we'll be taking you through some tips that are going to help you ace your exams and also, build your confidence and make you feel good after writing whatever test that you're gonna have on your finals and your prelims, things like that. So myself will be focusing on physical sciences specifically from grade 10 to 12, so physics and chemistry. So here are the tips that me and my team think will help you to ace your exams and also to feel good about writing your exams. And I think, one of the important things is all about feeling good, after each and every, test, things like that. You don't go home depressed, you don't, those kind of things. So number one, which is very important, is to read the instruction very carefully. So if you miss the instruction, obviously, you're not gonna get full marks, number one. You have a very high chance of not answering the question correctly. So that's the importance of reading the instruction carefully. So the instruction plays a very big role in you getting full marks. So here at the Gift of the Educators, we aim at academic excellence. We motivate our learners to achieve academic excellence, and we don't want mediocrity. We want people to get full marks. That's why we say you must always read the instructions carefully and understand them before you answer your questions. And then another thing that is very important is reading the question very carefully. So if you don't read the question very carefully, obviously you're not gonna get anything. The possibility of you getting zero is very high. You're not gonna get part marks even. It's the possibility of you getting zero. It's about 99.9%, because if you don't understand the question, obviously there's nothing that you're going to answer. So it's very important for you to understand the question. If it requires you to reread the question again and again, please do that, because that will help you ace your exams. So one of the things that are gonna maybe make you fail the whole paper is if you anxious. And one of the things that increases anxiety level in exams is to have a lot of difficult questions in your paper. So if you have a lot of those, obviously you're more likely to be anxious during your exams. So for you to save yourself from that danger, you need to start with simple questions. So by doing that, obviously you become, and then you'll be confident to answer difficult questions, because you'll be having that thing that if I manage to solve this, using this time, so obviously I'm gonna be able to solve this question, fast, and that will help you have more time to even check and verify your answers. So the importance of verifying answers is that when you're writing your exams, there are certain questions that when you write them, they feel correct, but just because of the minor mistakes that you might have had there, you might find that you did not answer the question correctly. So it's very important for you to verify your answers and to make sure that your answers are realistic, especially in physical sciences. These papers, all the papers, maths, whatever, they are moderated, and they make sure that whatever questions that they give you, these questions are realistic. So just make sure that you verify your answers, you maintain the realness of the paper. For example, so the example that I like to give people is that your answers that you give must be realistic. Uh, uh, they have to be realistic. They don't have to, sound like, you're living in another universe. For example, if you calculate the velocity of a bike, so if you get a velocity of a bike that is traveling at 100 meters per second, like you need to pause and think, 100 meters per second, that's a lot for a bicycle, sorry. So that's why you need to understand that, when you get an answer of 100 meters per second of a bicycle, that's why you need to pause as a student. As a science student, you pause and think, carefully about what you have written there. And that will help you to go back and identify whatever mistakes that you might have had. Maybe it would be that you interpreted the question wrong, or maybe you pressed your calculator wrong or whatever, but that will actually help you to, identify whenever you have made a mistake or not. So when you're answering your questions, it's very important that you show all your steps. So one thing that it's important in science is, you get a mark for almost each and every step that you include in your calculation. So there are certain fixed rule that examiners use. For example, 3 marks means formula substitution answer in calculations, and number 2, in diagrams, especially in free body diagrams, 3 marks means you need to include the 3 forces there. So these are the things that you need to consider when you're answering equations. So to get full marks in the question. So again, you need to make sure that, you need to understand that the marks that are allocated for the question kind of give you the idea of the steps that you need to show in that question. So obviously it will be uh, unrealistic for someone to uh, write 2 steps or 3 steps in a question that has 7 marks and expect to get full marks. So if you find yourself in that situation, the way you have 2 steps in a question that worth 7 marks, so you just know that you're not doing the right thing. Don't even have confidence of actually getting full marks there. You need to make sure that the steps that we give match the marks allocated in that question. And again, so when you are answering questions in physical sciences, so that's something that I've discovered in Umalusi diagnostic reports. So what these guys are saying is that in physical sciences, if you know that you get a mark for writing a formula. So in physical sciences, if you write a formula without substitution, they're not gonna give you that mark. So that's what they're saying. You need to substitute, So if you write a formula, you don't substitute anything, they're gonna leave it like that. So one thing that is very good about science is that, you can get free marks. So if you write a formula, if you write a formula and then you don't even understand the question, one of the things that you can do, you can substitute whatever values that comes to your mind, so that at least you get a mark, not 0. But this is not something that we're encouraging as gift of the educators, since I've said we aiming for academic excellence. So this, you're gonna only do it where you ran out of options. So what I'm trying to say is that in physical sciences, there's no learner that should leave a question unanswered, even if you don't have an idea of what's going on there. So just write whatever that's in your mind. So at least to get a mark on that. And then still on showing all the steps and answering the questions. Again, you know that we have multiple choice questions in physical sciences. So multiple choice questions can be tricky, especially in physical sciences. But at the same time, don't ever leave a question unanswered because you don't understand it. The best thing, that the least you can do is to pick whatever answer that seems to be correct to you, so that maybe by chance you can get an answer correct. So that's one of the things that is very important. And make sure that the definitions that you that are there, you answer them, all of them, because one of the good things about physical sciences, especially in CAPS, is that I think uh, 40 marks of 300, it consists of a definition. So already, if you manage to answer all the definitions, they already have 40 marks out of 300. So it's guaranteed that you have your 40 marks even before you write your exams, because definitions are very simple. And then now we're gonna go to the usage of diagrams. Diagrams play a very important role in helping you understand the question better. So there are a lot of topics in physical sciences where they can give you a question in words. One of the questions that I know, it's the likes of Doppler effect. They will just give you words there. Sometimes you don't have the diagrams, the likes of a vertical projectile. So one of the things that you can do uh, to help improve your understanding of the question is to use diagrams. So you can use diagrams in chemistry, physics. So this plays a very big role in helping you understand the question. So I'd like to emphasize in metric, grade 12 physics. So for, for work energy and power, guys, it's very important that you draw your free body diagram, even if you're not asked to do. Make sure that in your rough work, you draw a free body diagram, because remember, that's where you are required to know all the forces that are there on the object that is being studied. So just make sure that you have your, your diagrams there. And then also on diagrams, emphasizing these things. So when you're drawing free body diagrams, yes, we have seen a lot of textbooks using symbols, things like that. But according to the recent update from Umalusi, all the learners are required to write full names when indicating forces in a free body diagram. This means that the likes of writing FG or W for force of gravity, it's no longer allowed. You need to write force of gravity in full. And the likes of writing normal. So the reason why this guy did this is because a lot of learners for normal force, they used to write normal only. And then they've realized that normal is there in two different physics topics. So you talk about normals when you go to lights and refractions, things like that. So they've said all the learners need to write the forces in full. So failure to do so, obviously, you're gonna get penalized. So now, this is, it happens mostly in chemistry. So there are questions that require you to answer them using the cause and effect technique answering method. So when I talk about cause and effect techniques, maybe a lot of you might not understand, but I think the example that I can give you will help you understand how you're supposed to answer those questions. So normally these questions, they're worth 2 marks, but just because people don't understand the cause and effect answering technique, they end up getting 1. For example, let's say they ask you that why the release of carbon dioxide, it's bad for the environment, and then they give you 2 marks for answering that. So you need to understand, in these explanation questions, usually in chemistry, whenever you see 2 marks, you need to use the cause and effect answering techniques. So number 1, obviously one can say carbon dioxide causes pollution. And then if you're done there, I think you're gonna get 1 mark. So the cause and effect answering techniques requires you to understand what the release of carbon dioxide causes. So if you're using the cause and effect techniques, you understand what is it that the release of carbon dioxide will cause. Number one, I would say the release of carbon dioxide will cause greenhouse effect. So that's the cause, greenhouse effect, right? And then the effect. So now you're going to talk about the effect of greenhouse effect. Obviously, the effect is global warming. So answering this question would be the release of carbon dioxide causes greenhouse effect, which leads to global warming. So by doing that, you have included the cause and also the effect. So that's why you're going to get 2 marks. So that's how you need to answer these questions. And then in terms of, explaining and giving reasons. Number one, what you need to know here is that 3 marks or 4 marks in an explanation question actually means 4 points. So you don't have to write, a paragraph when you're explaining in physical sciences. What these guys want to identify is the number of points that you've included. Even if you can have 6 lines, but if you have 2 points in those 6 lines, you're gonna get 2 marks. So you must know at all times that when you explain, 3 marks means that you have to have 3 points in your explanations. And again, in explanations, you need to be direct when you're explaining. So there's something that I called indirect and direct explanations or reasons. So an example is when you are asked to, if you're asked why if you're being told that an object is moving at a constant velocity and you are asked why the net force is 0. So if you're asked why the net force is 0, if you say because the object is moving at a constant velocity. Yes, you're correct. The net force is 0 because the object is moving at a constant velocity, but your reason is indirect. So you don't have to raise a question to the person who's going to mark your paper or to the examiner or whatever. So that's indirect. So you have to be direct. What is it that leads to the net force being 0? Obviously, we know that acceleration equals to 0 leads to the net force being 0. So that's what I called a direct reason. So the last thing, which I think it's the critical part which governs everything here in physics, is for you to understand the concept. Understanding the concept before you go through the exam is very important, and that's gonna make you get total in almost everything and in all the definitions. For example, if we go to electrostatics, one need to understand that electrostatics we deal with particle charges or point charges. So if you don't understand that you're dealing with particle charges or point charges, you have a chance of getting the definition wrong, number one, a chance of getting the calculation wrong, and almost everything wrong there. Because what I've seen over the years and the books that are written there, it's the definition of Coulomb's law. If you don't understand that concept, you're likely to get 1 mark out of 2 when you're defining Coulomb's law, because people tend to, define Coulomb's law as a law that governs bodies. So it's wrong. So if you understand the concept, you understand that each and every law governs the fundamental, objects that are there in that topic. For example, one thing that I would like to emphasize here in understanding the concept is to, it's in Coulomb's law and Newton's laws, where you defined or you apply law of universal gravitation. So in these 2 topics, you need to when you're defining law of universal gravitation and Coulomb's law. For example, law of universal gravitation, it's either going to talk about 2 things. Number one, you're going to talk about bodies. Number 2, or it's either you talk about particles. So when you talk about bodies, when you're studying that law, it's forbidden for you, you're forbidden to actually talk about centers when you're talking about particles. That's very important. So you need to understand that a particle does not have a center. That's number one. So if you talk about bodies, that's why you're going to talk about centers. So you don't have to say directly proportional or inversely proportional to the distance between their centers when you're talking about particles, but you need to say them when you're talking about particles. So this also applies to Coulomb's law. So in Coulomb's law, you need to understand that you're dealing with particles, and when you state Coulomb's law, you don't have to talk about centers, because again, I'm saying and emphasizing that particles don't have centers. So if you include centers there, you're gonna get the question wrong. So I think that's one of the things that gonna help you as your exams. And most importantly, don't forget to include your units in your calculations. So these are the things that you need to identify when you're verifying your answers. So verifying answers can be tricky sometimes, or not all people get the time to verify their answers, because we don't normally plan the time that we want to spend in the whole question paper. So what you need to do when you're answering questions, it's, let's say your question, if your question is 6 marks, I don't expect you to spend more than 6 minutes still thinking about the question. So, you need to spend maybe about half of the marks that are allocated for the, about half the minutes of the marks that are allocated in the question. Because if you spend more time still thinking about the question, that can make you waste time, because at the end of the day, you might not end up understanding the question, and obviously time is. So this is to say, if you're answering a question, then there's something that you don't understand, and you see that it's wasting your time, just move on to the next question, so that you gather time to verify all the answers that you have written. So that's it. And the last thing that I'll advise you, after writing your physical exams, so immediately when you're done, you just need to take your bag and go straight to home directly. Don't stay with your friend, don't discuss the paper, things like that, because these things gonna frustrate you, because these guys will come to you and say, oh, what did you write there? And said, oh, I write these things like that. So the best thing that you can do after you finish writing, make sure that you go home straight, or maybe you chill with people who don't discuss the paper, and make sure that whatever that you did in physical sciences, it belongs to you and physical sciences. Don't let it affect the next subject, because if physical sciences give you a tough time, so then make it affect mathematics, because these are two different things, and combined they're gonna make you achieve academic excellence. I hope these tips will help you to ace your exams. And apologies to the grade 10s and grade 12s for grade 10s and grade 11. I've been focusing on grade 12 specifically, because I know that these guys, their papers are marked externally, and that's where they are strict. So for grade 10s, there are a lot of rules that you need to follow there. Those are the basic rules: reading instructions, reading questions carefully, quoting the formulas. And yeah, so for the grade 12s, that's where we have they have certain parts that are critical, and that they need to be addressed before they go into the exam rooms.
Okay, thanks so much, Lomulo. So that was a fantastic session. There were definitely some things that we could definitely take away, not just for physics, but we could apply across the board. So things like reading instructions carefully, reading the questions carefully, those can again be applied across every single subject. And even though today's session is mainly to help them in matrics because of upcoming prelims and upcoming trials, it's important for other grades, grades 10s, grade 11s, as Lomulo mentioned, to actually pay attention to these steps and implement them from now. Because another important thing is, if you can get these things right when you're young, imagine how much easier it would make your life in terms of grade 11 if you're in grade 10, or grade 12 if you're in grade 11 already. And even when you get to, for example, university, because things like reading and just paying attention to English and things like that become so important. Because if you misinterpret the question, let's say it's a 10, 15 mark question or whatever it might be, right? Even at like a tertiary level. If you misinterpret the question, you answer incorrectly, or say you provide what you think is the correct answer, but for the incorrect question, then you're going to lose all those marks. And imagine how painful that would be in the process. And the reason why I say that, the reason again why we're holding this session maybe let's dive a little bit deeper into it, is simply because all of us, all the tutors that you see on your screen at the moment, have experienced these problems personally in one way or another. We've all messed up in one way or another. I mean, that's how we learn, right? But what we're doing here today is trying to say to you that, hey, we've learned from this experience. Don't you go and make the same mistake. That's why we're here, not just to teach you in terms of education and trying to help you understand the concepts, how to understand, to tackle them and how to answer them, and to learn from our mistakes as well. Because if you don't have to suffer the same way that we did, why should you? So yeah, that being said, some other funny little experiences that I've had personally, for example, Flamono mentioned that when you write down your formula, make sure that you substitute, right? When I was still in school, just to give you a quick anecdote, I used to the whole timing thing was a big issue for me. And I didn't really understand that when you put down a formula, you need to substitute. So usually what I would do, I would take a formula and then I'd put I'll substitute it into my calculator and then just put the final answer down. Because here I was thinking, okay, I'm saving time. I don't have to write down everything. I don't have to go and say, all right, mass is equal to this, acceleration is equal to this, and then give a final answer. Now I just jump straight to the final answer. And guess what? I didn't get any marks for that. And the reason for that is because your teachers in that situation generally think that if they don't see any substitution, there is a possibility that you're cheating. Because now how do they know that you've gotten to the final answer without actually seeing your calculation? And that's why it's so critical to actually show your calculation. So you see, I mean, from a light-hearted point of view, we've really suffered in our own respective ways, and we really don't want you to suffer too. But thank you again, Glamulo, for that. And I think we're going to hand over to Mats now, if she is ready. And yeah, we'll take you through that. So Glamulo, if you can, you might just stop sharing your screen, and then Kalai, over to you.
Oh, so thanks.
Okay, my name is Kalevani. I'm the matric maths tutor, and I have some firstly, I'm studying actuarial science. I'm in my second year at the University of Johannesburg. I have some tips for exam techniques for the morning of your exam, during your exam, and I have some oral exam techniques. So most of these techniques are things I've learned from my own mistakes, and some of these tips are also from actual teachers. So getting started. So the morning of the exam, make sure you eat a healthy breakfast that will keep you full for the whole period of exam. Matrics write 3-hour exams, and you need to make sure that you are full, so your brain is working in an optimally manner. Also, make sure you're well prepared. Do not study the morning of your exam. You cannot leave any studying for the morning of your exam. As a useful tip, if you take subjects that involve a lot of definitions, for example, physics or chemistry, even bio, waking up the morning of your exams at about 2 o'clock in the morning till about 4, if you study for about an hour, just going over your definitions and some of your theory, it does help. It was something I used in matric, and when I woke up in the morning, it was still in my brain, it was fresh in my mind, so it helped. With that also being said, when I was in grade 10, and since I would get to school very early, and so would my friends, we would spend the morning going over our test or going over the content for our test. We test each other, and this wouldn't end very well for me. My friends would end up debating over something, or I'd realize I forgot to study a definition or something, and I would walk into the exam room very, very stressed. And I would end up sitting down and in a very panicked mode, and I would end up blanking out in my exam. This would make me lose a lot of time in my exam, about maybe at least 15 minutes before I would calm down and then think, okay, I've studied this, I'm fine. In matric, I realized I had to stop doing this. And since I would get to school at about 7:30, and our exams would only begin at about 9, I would make sure I'd go sit somewhere by myself, and I would do something that does not involve the exams, so not studying, not going over anything. Could include watching YouTube videos or things like that. And so that when you do go into your exam, you are in a very relaxed and composed manner or mode. So stay away from people that stress you out on the morning of your exam. If you are someone who does stress about your exam, try doing some breathing exercises for about 10 minutes when you do wake up. It does help with your stress levels and any anxiety. Also, before you leave your house, make sure you have all your necessary stationery items like your pen and calculator, and carry a bottle of water with you into your exam room. Okay, then some tips for during the exam. Manage your time very carefully. The amount of time needed for each question depends on the mark allocation. Do not spend more time on a question than you need to. Your mark allocations are really important. Sometimes students get a question and they tend to overcomplicate it. They could do half a page of working out for a question that is only worth 2 marks. You're wasting your time by doing this. A question that is worth 2 marks does not involve a lot of working out in maths, most subjects in fact, but a question that is worth more than 5 marks, obviously that does require a lot more working out. So take note of your mark allocation and work accordingly. When you have questions that follow from the previous one, for example, like 1.1, 1.2, those questions are often interlinked. Your examiner usually sets those questions in a way that it starts off with a very easy question and then it moves on to more difficult questions. So let's say, for example, you're working on 1.6. This is a question worth 6 marks. Most of the time, you need information that you've worked out from your previous question. For example, analytical geometry in maths. They could ask you to work out your gradient in the first question. And that question itself could be used to answer something else in your next question. So take note of that, especially when you're struggling with something that, like in your 1.6, for example. The 10-minute reading time you get is given to you for a reason. Plan your questions according to your strengths and your weaknesses. If you know that there's a topic that you still struggle with, make sure you leave that for the last. I would normally start with all my questions that I know I can get my marks with. I do not want to lose any marks by doing questions that I'm weak at. So yeah. Try finish your paper 10 minutes before the actual time so that you have time to go over your paper. With that being said, how can you efficiently double check your work? Because students double check their work and they still completely don't realize that they made a mistake in a question. There is a study that proves most students work from front to back when they first start their paper. So when you're double checking your work, try going from back to front, as this gives you a new perspective and you'll be more likely to pick up any mistakes. For the next technique, when you get to a difficult question, spend about a minute or 2 maximum on that question, and then move on to an easier question if you cannot figure it out. There is a study that proves that this technique combines both your modes of thinking. So you have 2 modes of thinking. You have your diffused mode and you have a focused mode. I'm not going to get too technical about it, but in general, your diffused mode is your more creative mode. And your focus mode is more your hardcore thinking that involves, a lot more brain power. And obviously you cannot be in both modes at the same time, but working from a difficult question and then moving on to an easier question and coming back to it, it combines both your modes of thinking. So it works for me, but if you're not sure if it's going to work for you, try working on it with a past paper first before you actually attempt it in your exam to make sure it works for you. When working with any question, always start with given information. Try to manipulate it into a form that is familiar to you and then work from there. They give you that information for a reason. This is critical when it comes to your geometry questions. When it comes to your financial maths, always draw your timelines. They give you a better understanding of exactly what you're dealing with, and you're more likely to basically succeed at the question as you can visually see what you're doing. Read your questions and your instructions at least twice. Highlight if you need to. Specifically with maths, for example, the instructions will tell you how many decimal places you must round off to. If you don't follow the instruction, you will be penalized. Look at your answer and check whether it actually makes sense to avoid any silly mistakes. Silly mistakes actually can cost you a lot of marks, and I speak from experience. This was a tip that comes from my maths teacher. She told us that you need to write your answers in a very neat and structured form. She told us think about it in this way. When your examiner, for example, your finals, your paper is marked externally. These markers sit from the morning till the afternoon just marking. And let's say it's now 5 o'clock, it's time to go home soon, and they're still marking your paper. And they get to your paper that is very messy and untidy, and they are tired. they're not going to want to mark your paper very nicely. And they're going to be more harsh on your paper than they should be. So make sure your paper is in neat and structured form. When they get to that paper at the end of a hard working day, they're going to be more likely to give you marks where they're like, you know, their work is neat, I can just give them the mark. This comes from a marker himself. Okay, and then moving on to some oral techniques. These come from an English teacher, a very experienced English teacher. So when writing out your cue cards, do not print it out on a piece of paper and then just cut it into like after each paragraph and staple them together. Now, most people tend to get very nervous and shaky when it comes to giving out speeches because they get intimidated by the class or anything like that. So write your speech on a cardboard cue cards, okay? So the reason for this is for your cue cards. So I have some cue cards here. When you hold it, you can hold it in this manner, where your hands, it prevents your hands from being shaky. With a piece of paper, if you hold it very tightly, the examiner is going to see that you're very nervous and it doesn't give off a very good impression. So make sure your cue cards are in a cardboard form so that you can hold it and you are steady. Another thing to make sure is your posture is very good. Your back must be upright and there must be a good distance between your feet. Firm, like you hold your ground very firmly. Also speak clearly and at a very good pace. Keep your cue cards low. You cannot stand there like this in front of the examiner. Keep it at a low pace. Do not read from your cue cards. This is not prepared reading, it is a speech. Also, you have to look at your audience. Now, if you get intimidated by your audience and it makes you uncomfortable looking at someone or looking them in the eye, look at the back of your class, but at the back of the wall, just above someone's head. So it makes it look like you're making eye contact when in fact you are not. And it helps a lot more. And it also gives the examiner the impression that you're a good public speaker, you know what you're doing. And yeah, I think that is all my tips, exam techniques.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Kalavani. So again, those are some awesome tips. I definitely like the one about having a good breakfast in the morning, because that's something I used to skip out on a lot. So usually, you know, you're rushing for an exam, okay, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm the kind of guy that would tend to be late a lot of the time. So I'm usually in a rush. I'm trying to get out of the house, and that's one of the reasons why I might not have breakfast. The other is sometimes you just get a bit nervous, and you know, then you just like, you know, I don't want to eat. It depends. Some people are nervous eaters. Some people don't eat when they're nervous. You know, again, every type of individual is different. But the most important thing is, as she said, have a healthy breakfast. Have a bowl of cereal, have a fruit, or something that can at least sustain you and allow you to think. You know, we already did one of those videos called Healthy Body, Healthy Mind. And if you take care of yourself, it'll basically reflect in your marks as it is. So that's really important. And maths and physics are those kind of subjects that no matter the pressure, no matter the question, try and stay calm. And if you see a question that you're not too comfortable with, skip it, make a mark on it, and come back to it at a later stage. You don't want to be spending too much time on a single question and then wasting time. Because let's say the last question, let's say you've got 12 questions in the paper, and question 12 might be the easiest question there is, but you might have an issue with it. So during reading time, as both tutors have said, go through your paper, look at your questions, and see which section you want to start with. Remember, you can start with any question that you really want to, as long as you label it correctly and you carry on from there. That's really important. And then just touching on oral tips again. So Kalaya had some fantastic oral tips. The one about looking over people's heads, that's a classic. It's definitely a classic. And that way you don't have to worry about their facial expressions. And sometimes we sit and wonder, okay, these adjudicators or our teachers, they just have these little like stern faces, and you don't want to see that because you're like, oh, am I doing something wrong? What's going on? So that's a really awesome tip. And in terms of cue cards, right? So if you go to some of these stationery shops, this is what I used to do when I was younger. A lot of them usually have prepared cardboard cue cards. So it's already got like little lines in it, and you can actually write on them. It's quite structured and things like that. So that's awesome. And then in terms of actually writing out your cue cards, right? So lots of people say keywords. And obviously, yes, stick to keywords. You don't want to write your entire speech on your cue card because that automatically makes you want to read it. However, at the same time, it depends on who you are as a person. So for me, what I like to do personally, and it might not work for everyone, but I like to write the first 2 or 3 words of my sentence, of each sentence on my cue card. So I put a bullet point and then write, okay, Yeah, like the first three words. And what that basically does is it stimulates your mind and your memory to remember what the sentence is actually about. So for me personally, I don't need to necessarily see keywords from the sentence, but if I can see the first couple of letters, the first couple of words of that sentence, it automatically reminds me of what I want to say. And then again, that's also really important why it's important. Like you need to practice your speech before you go through, like before you actually present it. Because if you don't, then even if you write down the first few words, you're going to wonder to yourself, okay, what was I actually trying to say here? And that's the last thing you want at the end of the day. All right. So before we hand over to accounting, I think Klamulo had a little point to add about English. I don't know if he wants to quickly unmute himself and then just voice that opinion, and then we can address it before we carry on. So Klamulo, would you like to quickly just speak about that little English point, and then we'll as tutors we'll address that.
So one thing what I added about English is that sometimes if you're struggling with English, especially kids that are in the rural areas, most of them they give up in almost all the subjects, including maths and science. So one thing that you must know about maths and science is that these subjects have their own terminologies and specific languages. So even if you're struggling with English, like big time struggling with English, so there's still hope that you can master this subject. I've seen it with myself. I started doing English in my matric, so it's like it was something new to me, but because I told myself and I realized that, these subjects, they have their specific terminologies and language. So what I'm trying to say is that in science, even if they give you a whole paragraph, even if you don't understand what's really going on there, but there are certain important or keywords that you need to underline, especially in maths. So as long as you understand, what they're talking about, if they're talking about the angle of inclination, what they're talking there, the words that they, they're not really important, but once you get what they want, it's important. It's like you need to master the specific, languages and terminologies in those subjects, and when you get that, you're done. I'm telling you, I'm not trying to say that you don't need to work on your English, because when you get to university, it's gonna be tough because you'll be having double burdens course, and also need to understand the English because the books there are just something else. But I'm trying to say that don't let English be something that it's against you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Lamulo. So he makes a completely relevant point there that when you look at a question, there's some specific keywords, just some very basic keywords that as long as you pick up on those keywords, you're already going to be set in the right direction. You already know in which direction they're going to be pushing you. For example, small things like factorize versus simplify. If you understand the difference between both of them, then you'll automatically know what the question is looking at. Even if it doesn't say solve for X or simplify for X or something along those lines, if you just see like the word factorize, it kind of already gives you an idea of what you're looking for. Or for example, the word cubic function. Now, you're not going to go and look for a parabola. You're going to know what a cubic function is because you've practiced it, even if you don't quite understand the language itself. So it's small things like that that really matter. In terms of English, let's quickly touch on it. Kadir, I know I'm taking a bit of your time here, but let's just quickly look at English since we're already on this topic. English and languages in general. How do we master languages? Now, there's a few things that people recommend, and of course, not all of us enjoy doing it. Personally, I wasn't one of them. But the most important tip is reading. At the end of the day, reading helps big time. If you sit there with a book, take a book that you enjoy, any genre, could be action, could be horror, whatever it might be. Entrepreneurial books. I mean, I love those personally. Sit there, and then the best thing you can do is have a dictionary next to you. I know it sounds really, really silly, but have like a little pocket dictionary, and most of these stationary bookstores, they have pocket dictionaries. So when you discover a word that, you don't quite understand, even if you don't want to underline it or flag it, what you can do is just open up the dictionary and then look at the meaning. And the best thing about that is as soon as you read it, especially a word that interests you, you won't forget it. Especially if it's a word that you think is, wow, okay, that's pretty impressive. You won't forget it. So if you really want to add to your English vocabulary and, you want to be able to speak at that sort of level, and not necessarily just understand the language, but become proficient at it, become, master that kind of language. English is actually considered one of the most complicated languages in the world because of all the grammatical issues and punctuation, etc., etc., etc. But if you read a lot, especially from writers that are professionals and are basically boffins in that field, you'll automatically pick up with. And then you'll see your literature, your transactional writing, all of that will start improving from there. In terms of poetry, Poems are very difficult to understand first time around. That's why, well, again, it depends on the individual. For me personally, when I have an unseen poem, it is a little difficult to understand. But that's when you need to start looking, as Glamola said, terminology becomes really important. So for example, if you know your difference between your assonance and your alliteration and your onomatopoeia and all that different stuff, then it makes it a lot easier, because when they ask you, what does this mean? You can start bringing in those terms. You can say, okay, the poet, because of alliteration, is trying to indicate this, and this is what he's trying to make it sound like, etc., etc., etc. So when you understand the basics, so I think the most important thing I'm trying to get you is, don't be intimidated by the fact of it being a poem, or like the topic in a sense. Try and understand the breakdown. So try and understand what each thing means, or what each terminology means, and how you can apply it to that specific topic, and that will make it much easier. In terms of foreign languages, right? Or not foreign, but rather your second or your first additional languages and so forth. Languages that you don't necessarily speak. Again, literally the keyword there, speak. You need to try and speak that as frequently as possible. So if you have, for example, if you're not proficient at Afrikaans or Zulu or whatever it might be, but you have Afrikaans or Zulu friends, or someone that can support you in that way. See, friends also play such an important role, because you need to find someone that doesn't judge you and that is willing to help you. For example, everyone that speaks a language that they currently speak proficiently, I'm going to take English, for example, and then we have a learner that doesn't speak English as well. The thing is, I was never able to speak English as well as I am able to now. Just think of it that way. You read a lot of motivational quotes that say every professional started somewhere. And how true is that? I wasn't born speaking English. I didn't, come into this world speaking English, for example. Over time you learn and you develop and stuff like that. And that's why, even if you're someone that's watching this video and you're very proficient at something, always try and help other people. And that's exactly what we do at Gifted Educators. We're quite skilled at what we do, but we want to help other people get to the same level and even surpass us. That's always what I tell students, Don't aim to be like your tutor. Don't aim to be like your role model. Aim to surpass that level too. Why stop? Why stop at that level? Why limit yourself to that kind of potential when you can go far beyond that? So what I'm trying to say there is, if you know that you're proficient at maths, let's say, you have a friend that's struggling, don't judge them. Don't say that, it's such a simple concept. It might be simple to you because maybe you've practiced it a lot, or because you have that natural aptitude, but some people don't. And that's where being supportive and having good friends and things of that sort comes really, really into play. Like, it's really important. And it makes life so much easier. I'm sure all the tutors on this call can actually relate, but even your friends at university, if you have really good friends that are supportive, that, university, tertiary education can be quite a mission, especially when you've done really badly in a test. But if you have friends that are supportive and that can help you get through that moment, it makes life so much better. And I speak from personal experience. Not necessarily even my friends, but the team at Gifted Educators as a whole. We support each other, and we always keep going on about this philosophy of a family. So if one of us have to basically go through a difficult moment, then we're all there to support each other. Whatever it might be, irrespective. So again, the really important point here, or the most important thing is, again, just help other people. If you're really good at something, and the really nice thing is, in biology, there's a specific term for it. I think it's like a mutually beneficial relationship kind of thing, right? I didn't do bio, so you're gonna have to forgive me for that, but hopefully one of the other tutors can add in. But basically, yeah, so there we go. Mutualistic relationships wherein, for example, you're good at maths and your friend is good at English. Help each other, because you help him with maths, he'll help you with English, and that's how we get better at things. And then, so back to languages, just to conclude there, with Afrikaans aside, or Zulu, or whatever it might be, aside from speaking the language, watch movies. Even if you rely on the subtitles a lot, it's okay. But what you'll realize is that you'll automatically start picking up on things as you go along. And I'm not saying watch dreadful movies. I know sometimes we all dread like our set books at school, or these movies that they make us watch because they're really not interesting and they bore us to death. So take a movie that you enjoy and then go and try and get an Afrikaans version of it, or an Afrikaans dub. I know it sounds silly, but what it will do is it will actually allow you to pick up on certain patterns and certain phrases. Like, for example, Stompie. We know that, Stompie, teachers go on about Stompie because students don't obey it, but it's something that really forms a structure, like the backbone of Afrikaans. And the more you speak it, at a level that it's supposed to be speaking at, not like, for example, slang or colloquialism. Because also, we know we have Afrikaans teachers that say sometimes Afrikaans kids speak Afrikaans, but not in the correct manner. Because, just think about English sometimes. When you're speaking to your friends, you don't really care about the way that you say things or even the correct terminology. Like, for example, use words that might not even be in a dictionary. So be careful in those circumstances. Be careful who you speak to, be careful what you pick up on. And that's really the best way to master languages. And again, with any subject, practice, practice, practice. Understand the basics, understand the foundation, and build from there. But yeah, that's basically it from the languages side. And without further ado, we're going to hand over to our accounting department, and he's going to take over.
Hi guys, I hope you guys are well and taking care and stuff. I'm a second year accounting science student at the University of Johannesburg. It's tough, but I'm here to make your load a bit better. And I'm not going to take up too much of your time because it's also going a lot over, but I just want to bring key points to you guys because our other tutors have also covered a lot of what I want to say. So I just want to also touch on the things that lead up to the exam and things like that. Okay. So without further ado, yeah. So I want to tell you guys that review is very important before the exams. It has been mentioned by our other tutors. And to make this easier, take a day to just read over your work, not study it, not stress about it, just read over it. And then as you do that every week, it does make it easier for you to remember what you want to say or what you want to learn when the exam comes through. So review your work maybe every week, or you can have different days of the week where you do different subjects, such as maybe on a Monday do physics, maybe on a Tuesday do accounting, maybe on a Wednesday do maths, things like that. You don't have to cram everything one time, just do it as collectively as possible, but spread out as possible. And from there, it'll make your studying way easier before the exam. And that also prevents you from blanking out and doing things that make you want to stress. So do a lot of those, and from there you'll see results. And if you guys are complaining about time or things like that, when it comes to things like that, rather get a timetable that would help you space your day. And it could be flexible, but try as maximum as possible or as most as possible to stick to it. So that was just in general, and I guess now I'm going to start with accounting. So in accounting, I always hear the phrase "there wasn't enough time." I'm a victim of that phrase as well, even in university at the moment. It does play a toll, but I do need to take my own advice sometimes. But I need you guys to remember that if you practice constantly when it comes to accounting, it's to be seen that it builds your confidence, and you are more likely than not to get the correct answer the first time. And if you do have time in the end, you can check your work. The other tutors have touched on this point as well, but it's more likely than not the first time that you are able to get the correct answer because of the constant practice. So don't waste your time on rechecking and rechecking and rechecking. Rather do everything first, and from there, if you have time, hopefully, you can have the last 10 minutes or something, because I know in matric exams, you can't really leave the venue. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know how far that has changed. So even if you finish in half an hour, you have to sit there and you have to put your head down. It doesn't matter how long you take or how short you take, you can still review your work, okay? So the point that I would like you guys to take from there is get through your paper first and then recheck. Don't recheck in between. That's going to take up more time. Okay. So I have a tip from my teacher as well that is very important but very simple as well, which plays a major part. There's two very fundamental tools that you need when it comes to accounting. One natural, one man-made. So I know it's gonna sound stupid or not in the correct context, but the natural one, you don't pay anything for that tool. It's given to you just like that. It's without any hesitation or whatever. Okay, there are certain circumstances when it comes to extreme circumstances, but that tool is your finger. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but actually putting your finger on the question and going along and redoing it again actually helps you to understand the question better. And this is just to complement the ruler idea, which is man-made too. So she always told me that use a ruler as you're going through your trial balance or you're going through information, so you don't skip anything out. And as you go through, take care of that thing, either scratch it out, or if you haven't dealt with it, make a ring around it. Not a small ring or something, like actually make a ring to draw your attention back to it. And that's what I've also learned and what has helped me in my matric exam when it came to accounting. And you can use it for other subjects as well, but I feel it does mostly apply to accounting when it comes to the trial balance and information and things, because you are given a lot of information and it's quite daunting to actually look at those information and just start writing. I feel that that's where your confidence needs to build up. And that leads me to my next point, which means answer what you know first. So you have to basically go to the question that you know first. In accounting, you get an answer booklet. And even for physics and maths, it's such that you can answer whichever question you want first. You just have to properly indicate it and number it. So when it comes to accounting, you get an answer book. You can start with any question. Just say if you're more comfortable with bank reconciliation than you are with financial statements. Start with bank recon, build your confidence, and then from there, it makes you think differently and broad, and it gives you that confidence that you need. Okay, and what I want to talk about is it was touched on by the other tutors, but I also have a different perspective. So when it comes to studying in the morning and whatever, what I do is I also adopted it in university as well. It's stop studying 1 hour or a minimum of half an hour before the test or exam. You can revise your work, but what you learn in that half an hour before the exam, the maximum time is half an hour. Stop half an hour before, because in that half an hour, what you read over, you're not going to remember. Take that half an hour to breathe, walk around, maybe eat a fruit or something of that sort. And the other advice that I want to give you is principles remain the same, but just the question changes. So they won't teach you something, they won't test you on something that was not taught. Think of it like this. They're always going to give you something that was taught, but in a different way. So it's like tomato, tomato. It's still the same thing. So think of it like that. And from there, you'll be able to build your confidence that you did look at it and you did understand it. When I was in accounting in matric, it was more likely that we didn't have formula sheets and stuff, but I have been told that they're slowly implementing formula sheets in accounting. I don't know how far that is true, but I want you guys to know that make use of it. Don't leave it blank or anything. Rather, make the most notes that you can on it, because it is your paper after all. I mean, a clean paper has done no work at all. Whereas if there's marks, if there's arrows everywhere, and you understand what you're doing, do it. No one's gonna look at your paper, and more likely than not, you get a chance to take your paper home when it comes to finals and prelims and things like that. So use the paper to the maximum capacity that you can. When it comes to accounting as well, it's just like physics and maths. So this is also key points that my other tutors have also given me. So I would like to acknowledge them when it comes to things like this. You need to practice before your exam, but don't overwhelm yourself with things that are irrelevant at the time. So what I mean by that is practice what you are bad at, but don't forget what you are good at, because you need to also work on your strengths rather than only your weaknesses, because that's where you can also get marks. Because with me personally, from personal experience, when I didn't know work and I constantly spent time on it and I put most effort in that, sometimes I did forget a few concepts, but when it came to the things I knew, I also didn't practice that, which made it a bit worse. So focus on the things that you are bad at, but don't forget the things that you are good at. So uh, there are also other points that I would like to take note of is past papers when it comes to accounting. And it was so much for my accounting, my accounting teacher in general. She used to always give us a booklet when it came to doing activities and stuff, and that booklet basically helped me pass accounting and get the marks that I required or needed for accounting. So another thing is, when it comes to accounting, you guys need to learn your format. It's like learning definitions in physics. Your formats are really important when it comes to accounting, because if you don't know your format, but you know your how to apply the question, how is that going to help you? So what our teacher used to do is, she used to give us the past papers, but she never used to give us the answer booklets. We had to write our formats out ourselves, and we had to sit and basically learn it as we're writing it. And from there, we would only start our homework. So it would take us about, I would say, 3 hours to do our work, but that's what helped us to get the marks that we required in the end. Okay, so I also don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm just going to go over a few tips again that I might have also went over, but this is more from the internet as well, that I try to prepare for you guys. Focus your study in the most important areas. So review your topics, as I said before, when it comes to learning every week. Keep a day for maybe physics or for maths or for accounting or bio, whatever subject compilation that you have chosen. Okay, so make sure you know the material. That is more self-explanatory, because you really need to know what you're doing before you can answer anything that is relevant. So always understand and know your material. And another thing, when it comes to accounting, you have to understand, not memorize. It's not something where you can read the textbook and just understand the examples. You have to physically do it yourself. And I feel that does apply a lot with maths and physics as well, apart from definitions in physics and formulas and stuff like that, and also formats when it comes to accounting. So always think of the understanding and things. There are a few things that you can memorize, but not the examples. Always remember that. And I don't know if you guys have watched the previous boot camps and stuff, when it was said, or it was said before, I'm not sure when, but when it came to the RES method, don't do that, guys. I've been victim. I fell in the trap, and I still didn't know what I was doing. This is from experience, and I always use this joke. I'm not that old, guys. I know the actual things that you guys are going through, and we are studying further at Kids of the Educators as well. So we still are going through the same problems. Don't make our mistakes again. Okay, so yeah, I have spoke about answering the easy questions first, and what I also want to bring you guys attention to is, when it comes to time, I I've actually omitted this concept. But I want you guys to know that's what accounting is about, omitting things and accounting for them after. So always use a watch. That's a really important idea that you guys need to take into consideration when you guys are busy with your accounting exams, and pace yourselves. And more often, they have the number of minutes that are written on your paper that you should stick to. So when you actually do the questions that you know, you have extra time for the questions that you don't know. So think of it like that. Use a watch and pace yourselves. So the next question here is maintain a steady pace, which also relates to the watch. And guys, I've tried to keep this as brief as possible. And there has been a lot of other things that were mentioned when it came to the other tutors as well. And it does also apply to accounting. Not everything in detail, but most of the things, as well as our maths tutor gave us a lot of general tips that does apply to accounting. And also science, there was a few things that was said. If you guys need to remember, just, you can rewind, it's recorded and stuff. So with that being said, I just want to conclude and say, guys, good luck with your matric exams and things like that. If there are any other suggestions or things, with the comments, and because this was supposed to be a live stream, it's supposed to actually happen interactively, but due to our difficulties mentioned in the start, you can leave comments, and we will be sure to get back to you and do the things that you need us to speak about. And if you do need help, I mean, even if you just need like some pep talks or something, we have made videos about that. And if you guys want, we can make new ones. And yeah, that's what I want to say. And I just wish you guys all the best when it comes to exams, because it does get rough. I just need you guys to pray or do things that make you calm and take it from there. So that's basically what I want to say when it comes to accounting. And I hope you guys have benefited from the accounting talk. So yeah.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kadir. So you also mentioned some really fantastic things that apply across the board from school, even to tertiary education. And that's again, as you said, because we're studying further in terms of the accounting field. Just another few things to add on quickly. In terms of accounting, so like you mentioned, you might get the format in your answer book, but a big thing to remember is that you don't always have to fill up that format. So let's say you're asked to do like an income statement and you notice, or like a general ledger or something of that sort, and you still notice that there's a few rows open and you're wondering to yourself, did I miss something in the information, in the trial balance? Should there be something in that line? And what happens is sometimes your educators, whether BGE, IEB, leave like spaces open on purpose. So it's basically just to try and trick you, but you need to make sure that you're confident about what you've answered. So you're not worried about, is there something that should be there? And also sometimes in the information, in school, maybe not so much, but like, for example, going to tertiary education, you get a lot of irrelevant information. So you need to make note of what goes where. So what usually, like, for example, if you're doing, let's just say journals, next to each item, you'll write like, okay, GJ, CPJ, CRJ, things like that. And it kind of gives you an indication. Even if you're not, it'll just give you an indication of what you're looking at. Are you looking at a cash item? Are you looking at a credit item, something that's been sold on credit, things like that? And then you'll know what's relevant for whatever you're preparing. And whatever is not relevant, don't include it. Don't feel pressurized to include it. And that's a big mistake that students often make. They'll look at something and they'll say, but I can't figure out where to put this. Oh, geez, I need to put it somewhere. No, that's not the case. Leave it out, because often more than not, it's been included just to mess with you. And I know it's something unfortunate that they do, but it's just to test, where you are at that point in time and how well you know your work. So that's another really important thing with accounting that's helped me a lot. As Kadir mentioned as well, understanding is really important. Your concepts, when it comes to ratios, understand the structure of answering as well. And the only way you'll be able to do that is through past papers. You get an understanding of how many marks are allocated towards the ratio, how many marks are allocated towards the justification, explanation of the ratio, and the method of answering that ratio. There's always a certain style. Like, for example, you can't say it's a good or bad ratio. You'd rather say it's acceptable, unacceptable, things of that sort, right? So obviously it depends on what your educators taught you as well. Pay attention to what they've taught you. They're there for, for your betterment. And obviously we're here just to support you and give you that extra support, those extra tips that you might not have heard, just like we've done today. So that's really important. Now, quickly just diving into some general tips and then revising some tips. As mentioned previously, understanding content, understanding terminology is probably one of the most important things. Then, as Kadir mentioned, time management is so important. So you can either, go to your venue with an analog watch or a digital watch or whatever you want to choose. And again, it's up to how you would like to work. But keep track of time, and then keep track of how many minutes are allocated for each question and things like that. With the digital watches, what I like to do, sometimes just put it on a stopwatch mode. Because you know that your paper is like, let's say 180 minutes or 120 minutes. So start it and then keep looking at it, keep referring to it. That also being said, your working space, your desk space is so important. And basically, the way that you lay out your calculators, the way that you lay out your stationery and your rulers and stuff like that, I know it sounds really silly, but it's rather that you have everything accessible and then you click on the ball as compared to not digging into your stationery. Like, okay, firstly, it needs to be clear. But then still, like digging through and trying to find a pencil or trying to find an eraser, you'd rather get to your working space and lay everything out. That's something that I personally do. Take a calculator, take 2 calculators if you have. It's always good to have a spare. Place them on the desk. And I know it sounds really silly. Like, my calculator is probably not going to stop working. Or what's the chances? Ever heard of Murphy's Law? When you need it to work the most, that's when it stops working. So you'd rather be packing another calculator or another pencil or something like that. Make sure that you have spares. Lay them out on your desk. Keep 2 pens to the right, maybe 2 pencils to the left, your eraser, your ruler, and then take your watch off and then leave it on your desk. So it doesn't have to be on your hand. It can be just somewhere accessible. So you can quickly look down, okay, I've got time. And make sure that you remember as well what paper you're writing and how much time is allocated to that. I've had certain circumstances where, for example, I'm writing, let's just say science, for example, a 3-hour paper. And for some reason, I think I have 2.5 hours. And I am stressing because I think I've only got half an hour left, where I still got like an hour left. So be really, really careful to pay attention again to your instructions, how much time you have, what type of rounding you need to do, and that kind of thing. Over and above that, stay hydrated, like Kalai said earlier. Take a bottle of water, make sure that you drink, take a breather. If your hands are getting sweaty, wipe them on your pants, take a breather, relax, sit back. You do have a couple of seconds. You'd rather be in a better state of mind than panicking and trying to finish. So do that. It's really important. And let's say time is an issue for you, right? And you know that you may not finish the paper. My biggest suggestion is whatever you do, do it properly. So if you know that you're only going to finish an X amount, right? Or you're feeling it, or you're looking at the question paper, like the tutor said, attempt every question, but the questions that you're certain of, make sure that you get them 110% correct. That's really important. Right. Then other general tips would be dressing, right? So I know that we all have to wear school uniform and things of that sort. Some schools might allow you to wear your PE uniform or like your PT uniform, whatever you want to call it, tracksuit, stuff like that. So in summer, stay cool, right? Don't wear anything underneath. Of course, it's up to you. If you're allowed to wear your PE uniform, make use of that. It's generally a lot cooler. In winter, take all the precautions, wear vests, wear long johns, use a scarf, use a beanie if you have to. I mean, I know it messes up your hair, but still, you'd rather be in the best condition possible and then write your exam. Wear gloves. Those are really important because you don't want your hands being cold when you start an exam. I've had so many cases where you want to start and you want to really get into it, but your hands are so cold and so stiff, you don't know what to do. There's that. The other trick is just sit on your hands. Before your paper starts, sit on your hands. I know it sounds really silly, but it'll warm up your hands and it'll get you ready to go, So again, those are some really important tips. Your working space, your time management, even your mental state, what you've eaten in the morning, how you're dressed and things like that plays such an important role. And these kind of tips, again, as I said, apply across the entire board. Make sure that your desk is also stable, if that makes any sense. More often than not, students will get a desk that kind of shakes a lot. So again, a small little tip that we can do for that, ask for a piece of paper, fold it and fold it and fold it until it's a bit thicker, and then place it under the leg that doesn't appear to be touching the ground until it stabilizes. Yes, it might seem silly. Yes, other people might be like, okay, what are you doing? But you rather be in the most comfortable position, most comfortable environment, because you might not necessarily be able to choose the desk that you want to write at, and that's how you should go. More often than not, a lot of tutors can agree that you have a designated desk actually for the entire exam period. So on the first day, get there, assess the situation. If everything seems fine, then obviously put your piece of paper under your desk. Other important things that haven't really been mentioned yet, exam prep is also really important, as I said, but don't forget certain things like your ID and, or for example, your exam timetable. For IEB, I know that your exam timetable is a compulsory. So make sure that you walk into the venue with these kind of things because they generally turn you away if you don't have them. And the last thing you want is to be stressed out for your exam as it is, and then you get there and you forget everything. So my suggestion is keep everything in a bag. I know lots of people say they don't want to take bags because it's unnecessary, you have to leave them outside. But I would take a bag, keep all my ID, my exam timetable, all that stuff inside the bag. And then when you need to write your prelim or your exam or whatever, pull it out and then just take it through. You'll know that it'll be in your bag for however long, and that's okay. Again, clear pencil case, that's all really important. If you're writing in summer, some schools are quite lenient about it. So if you're wearing a tie, ask them if you can just undo the top button and loosen your tie, especially on really hot days. Lots of schools are actually very generous and very lenient when it comes to those things because they understand. You can't write and you can't focus in a very hot environment. Take off your blazer. You're not pressured to do any of that stuff. So make sure that you feel comfortable. You always want to be relaxed. You always want to be in a good state of mind. If you like listening to music before your exam, as Kalai said, and as Kadir said, in that 30 minutes before your exam, do something you enjoy. Listen to a track that you enjoy, listen to some classical music, whatever it might be, something that'll calm you down. And then that's the best way to start an exam. So from Gift of the Educators, those are really some of the best tips and tricks that we can give you regarding exam technique, exam prep, and things like that. As we were saying, exam prep is equally as important as exam technique. So go back and watch the study skills bootcamp if you need to, and things like that. It's all available. And that also being said, if you have any other tips, like Kadir said, any other suggestions, if you want to see any other motivational videos or any other workshops / bootcamps, if you have any things that you would like to see in the future, feel free to drop them in the comment section as well, and we'll start prepping on that for you. So for example, if you want to see something about stress management, I know we've done a little video on stress, but if you want to get a bit more details or tips how to manage stress, then let us know. Drop that comment down and we'll take it from there because we're here to cater for you. So just before we conclude, back to Gift with the Educators as a whole. As I mentioned previously, we are a non-profit tutoring organization. If you haven't heard about us, the 3 subjects that we've addressed today, those are the 3 subjects which we tutor, 3 hours each. Each session is specifically designed to make sure that students maximize. So please, again, feel free to get in touch with us. You can either visit our website, www.gote.org.za, or just, again, drop your comment in the section, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. And then, if you want to enroll in our program, we'll definitely be keen in helping you out with that. For the students that are enrolled with us at the moment, this workshop is extremely important, or this boot camp, because, again, we have our monthly assessments. Our monthly assessment is coming up for this month, and it was really important that you guys understand how to prep and how to actually think during those exams. As it is for those that don't know, we also set our own assessments with a pass rate of 50%. It's usually a 30 marker, depending on the period, if it's end of term or whatever it might be. And those assessments are set at the highest possible standard. So again, they use, or they mirror tertiary education or tertiary institute quizzes, where you only get a mark for the final answer, so you don't actually get a mark for your workings. And then, as Clamulo said earlier, we try and ensure that students get 100% for everything. That's why we do it like that. So aside from preparing you for tertiary education, we want to get you into the mindset of, I need 100% or nothing at all. That's exactly how it is. So use all these tips, try and stay calm during your upcoming assessment, not just your prelims, but again, your assessment with us, and do your best. That's the most important thing. At the end of the day, we always feel pressurized to try and, achieve these wild marks. And as long as you set your goal and you achieve your goal, that's the most important thing. So don't ever feel pressurized by anyone or anyone else. You do your best and work as hard as you possibly can. And the assessments that we do, again, as well, for those that don't know, they go into their own progress reports. So each student is required to fill out a little subjective progress report. And that's how we maintain the progress of students. We don't necessarily only rely on education from your school, but education with us as a whole. So it's a completely different type of program that you enroll in. It's set at a much higher level, and we ensure that students achieve that academic excellence, as Lamulo said. So before I conclude, I'm just going to ask my tutors if there's anything else they would like to say. Kadir, anything else you'd like to add in?
I did forget one thing, but I mean, like I'm gonna say again, that's accounting. But yeah, for those who are able to use highlighters in the exams and it's permitted, please use them. Because when it comes to me in tertiary education, I use highlighters a lot. And with tertiary education, we are allowed to use highlighters in our reading time. So first get permission and stuff before you guys just start using highlighters, because I don't want you guys to say that I said you can use highlighters, but try and speak to them if you can, or even if you can't, use a pen and underline. I guess it serves, it's not like as highlighters are, but I mean, it's close, or you can use different color pens and stuff like that. So that's also links with the thing when I said make notes on your paper. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kadir. Some of our tutors did have to leave during the session, so apologies for that, guys. I mean, they send their best regards as well. And we will be releasing a video soon that we all want you to check out. It's basically just a video saying how much we care and how well, we want to wish you all the best for prelims and final exams. And we're always here to support you. So aside from all the assessments and stuff that you have to do with school or with us, we're always going to give you that 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support. I mean, our tutors might not get back to you at 2 o'clock in the morning, but they will get back to you as soon as they see your message. So we care, we really want the best for you, and just know that you're not alone. That's the most important thing, all right? If you ever get emotional or anything of that sort, feel free to call one of us up. Even if you're not part of our program, we also want to help with student support. So feel free just to message one of us, and trust me, one of our tutors will get in touch with you and we'll really help you out and just see what the problem is. At the end of the day, that's why we're a nonprofit. We're here to help all students. And if you know someone that is struggling and needs a bit of a talk, feel free to send them our way. And again, we'll get in touch with them and we'll just try and make them feel a little bit better. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, apologies for the live stream and the technical issues. We will ensure that the technical issues are sorted out for next month's live stream. But yeah, again, wishing you all the best for your prelims. We really hope the session helped. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. Thanks so much, guys, and have a good one.
Thanks.